Good morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock, and you're very welcome to this Project Edward First Friday, which is 2 weeks late. So it's our third Friday, as the holding slide was saying. It's a discussion today on the issue of democratic roads and exactly what that means. Here to help us have that conversation are Dr. Santiago Amietta from the University of Keele and Alan Hiscox from the British Horse Society. So we're going to be recording this. You should have your camera available for use and your microphone if you wish, and pop your hand up once we've gone through the first half hour or so, and we'll come to you with give you the opportunity to pose a point, ask a question to Santiago or Alan. So we're asking what it would mean. Oh, by the way, my name's James Luckhurst from Project Edward, and we're very grateful to Westcotec for supporting our series of First Fridays, but we can't keep having them on third Fridays if they're called first. So I'll have to think about a new title, or otherwise be more strict with my calendar operations. So we're asking what it would mean to move towards more democratic roads. Streets and rural lanes where different kinds of movement are genuinely valued, where rules feel fair and legitimate, and where no one is pushed to the margins simply because they're slower, quieter, or less visible. So Santiago and Alan, I'm sure, will see this from different and really interesting angles. Santiago Amietta from Keele University works on how law, justice, and everyday life intersect, including who gets heard and who's ignored when we design and regulate public space. Alan Hiscox, Director of Safety at the British Horse Society, leads the Dead Slow campaign and works daily with riders, drivers, and authorities to make sharing the road with horses safer and more respectful. So we're going to explore how power and voice shape our road environment, what a fair balance between motor traffic and other users might look like, and what practical steps could take us closer to roads that truly work for everyone. Let's start with Alan Hiscox from the British Horse Society as we mark 10 years of Dead Slow. Alan, congratulations on that milestone. Just give us some sort of flavour for the impact that you think Dead Slow has had, and what's left to do. We'll maybe save the what's left till later, but give us a report so far.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years, I can't believe it. It only seems like yesterday when we launched the campaign back in 2016. And, when you look at the statistics from 2016 to now, I mean, yes, there have been some encouraging falls in horse fatalities and injuries, although, an average 56 horses are being killed on our roads over the past 10 years. But if I look at the difference that it's made, certainly from 2024 to 2025, I mean, we saw a 10% decrease in the number of incidents that were recorded with the British Horse Society, and a 15% decrease in the number of road rage incidents. So I suppose on that side is good, but I don't want to grab defeat from the jaws of victory. But horse deaths and on the roads actually went up from 2024 to 2025. But I am encouraged. And those highway code changes that I'm sure we'll talk about in the next hour or so in 2022, I do believe perhaps now they are making a difference, certainly with younger drivers. So yes, it is a milestone. It's one that I look at and think, well, yes, I think we have made a difference. We have had an impact, certainly getting into conversations and groups where horse and rider and carriage driver safety is now beginning to be discussed.
Thank you, Alan. Santiago Amietta, then, you've written about justice and the governance of mobility. So what does a democratic road mean to you in practical terms?
Thank you. Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Alan. Nice to see you too, and all your guests today. What it means, well, the practical there is going to be difficult for me. I'm closer to thinking of democracy and participation with a strong conceptual element. The first thing I would say is it is great that you're putting it in the question. Yes, that we're bringing these kind of expressions into conversations about things like road safety, and it would be great if it gets mainstream, because if we start talking about roads as a democratic space or as an aspiration for democracy, that would be great. The first step to understanding what a democratic road would be is to acknowledging that the road is not just technical infrastructure, yeah, but a socially and politically constructed space, yeah, through design, through policy, through enforcement, through sanction, yeah. So there is an inevitably political nature to the road as a thing, yeah, and that as a political space, it's a super interesting one. It is our biggest public space. Yeah, it is the one that still we all use in an era of increased privatization of everything, including spaces. The road is one that we still all use. We all claim ownership and belonging to, whether directly or at least getting it used by someone else for us. Yeah. So in that context, in that overtly political space, what would it mean to make it democratic? Well, a democratic road is one in which the road is treated as a public good, yeah, one that is designed, that is managed so that everyone can move and use it safely and sustainably, yeah, and also one in which we all have opportunities to participate, yeah, to enjoy them, to be safe in them, to decide how they are designed, how they are used. And these opportunities, unfortunately, are not equally distributed at the moment. Yeah, so a democratic road, a radically democratic road, yeah, is one in which every decision from the design, not just of the road, but for example of the vehicles that are going to be on that road, all the way to the sanction of any wrongdoings on it, reflects democratic values of fairness, of inclusion, of participation, of accountability. Yeah.
Okay. Alan, how are you reacting to that? What does that ideal world sound like? You wouldn't have a job, would you?
Well, do you know what, James? If it was like that and no horses or riders or carriage drivers were injured, then yes, I'd be glad to hang my riding boots up, if that's the right word. I mean, democracy, absolutely. I mean, it's a very sort of wide-ranging term, but I would say, and I agree with Santiago on this one. I don't think that certainly equestrians have a full voice. Now, I'm not saying that is by design. I just don't think that we are still considered in a way that we should be. I mean, you know, the hierarchy of road users. I was, on a call a few days ago, and they were always talking about pedestrians and cyclists, and I had to sort of chip in and sort of say, well, what about horse riders? Those three words. And horse riders, well, and carriage drivers as well, and horse riders tend to be dropped off, not by a design, but I just don't think we are still in that mix. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, and I really wish that it was yeah, a level playing field, for want of a better word. And people, oh, what about horse riders? What about carriage drivers? When the whole aspect of road safety, but also safe off-road access, is considered.
Okay, well, look, we're here partly to talk about 10 years of dead slow. So a decade in to dead slow, we're still seeing thousands of incidents a year, aren't we? So what does that say about whose voice is really being heard in the system when we set priorities and spend money on improving roads?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's that awareness of drivers about what they should do when and if they see a horse on the road, and getting that awareness out there. We are, as a society, we're trying to involve drivers. So there's that old adage, tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll understand. And when we're actually trying to get out there and let somebody know what it's like to ride a horse on a road, how challenging that is, and then the penny begins to drop. So getting that awareness of horse riders on the roads, and I still think we've got a long way to go. Driving instructors are most definitely on side with this, but I think at the top levels, maybe they're looking at the Department of Transport and the way that they are looking at their road safety strategy. We were very disappointed that we weren't involved in the wording about rural roads. And we are one of the road users that is at significant risk of injury in a collision. So yes, we do feel a little bit underrepresented, if I can get that word out, in many areas.
Santiago, let's talk about who holds power then in how roads are designed, regulated, and policed, and who's being left out, and what we need. How do we deal with that?
Well, another very interesting question, another very interesting expression to bring and to kind of mainstream into our conversations about road safety, which is power. Yeah? If we think the roads as a political space, we need to think of power and who holds it. Good news is that power is something very fluid. Yeah, it is good news for the democratic approach, because it means that there are, of course, identifiable nodes of power, but also other opportunities for participation and for influence and for resistance. Yeah, my project on our project on journey counts with Helen was an example of something that had become regular police business because of kind of grassroots pressure. This is something that happened entirely from below, and that's brilliant. Of course, that said, the most power over roads tends to sit with a relatively narrow set of actors, which is what Alan is pointing to, and I think everyone in your audience today will know about this. So you have national and local authorities that are going to control the funding, the design standards, the planning priorities. You have expertise, your engineers, your technical experts using models and metrics to shape what happens in the roads, of the flow of traffic, congestions, any cost-benefit analysis, etc. Often prioritizing principles like efficiency and speed in that movement rather than those democratic principles that we were mentioning. Of course, the police and other enforcement agencies hold power, retaining substantial discretion over rules and their application in many cases. And of course, we have this other hierarchy of power that Alan was mentioning, and that is now explicit in legislation as well, which is, and we have a clear answer here. So the power in roads is mostly with motorists. Yeah, not only because we use the biggest and most powerful vehicles, but also because road design and policy has been historically structured around the convenience of especially the user of the private automobile, at least for the last century or so. And I think, as you mentioned again, this expression power, I would also like to mention, for example, the symbolic power of those who are in a privileged position to shape discourses and to set up agendas. Yeah, I'm thinking of part of the media, for example. Think of what part of the media and part of the political spectrum wants you to be afraid of, for example, when it comes to road discussions, yeah, and compare that to who suffers the most damage on the roads or who is a more vulnerable last position, as Alan said. Yeah.
Yep, and you
So
just froze there. So just say that last sentence again because I missed it. I don't know if anyone else did, but you froze up. So that was making really. I mean, that was leading me to a point. In fact, with in terms of of the kind of moving, I suppose, to reallocation of space. That's what I'm talking about. Let's use that as an example. And who should hold the power? Who should be kind of, how should that happen when, and I'm thinking particularly of an example, I think in Southwark recently, where there was, I think the A200, one lane has been taken out and reallocated for use by cyclists. Now, they will welcome that. Residents, I assume, will welcome it, a safer route. But businesses, drivers are seeing an unacceptable congestion and delay. So that's also reallocation of space framed as essential safety and climate justice, but by a lot of drivers framed as imposed from above and completely unworkable because it can take them 45 minutes to go 150 meters. That's what I'm quoting. So there. Now, what was the question? Perhaps you can comment on that and that reallocation of space and how that how we should perceive that.
I can certainly come in there, James, on that reallocation of space. I mean, I know you mentioned the road or the thing in Southwark, but if you look at sort of in rural areas, and horse riders only have access to 22% of the rights of way in this country. So, we would like that there are multi-user routes everywhere where you can have cyclists and pedestrians and horses all using the same routes, because ultimately getting horses off the roads will increase the safety of horses, obviously. And when we look at the LTM 120, the guidance recycleways infrastructure, I mean, that really was something where horse riders had a detrimental impact to them, and we want to be consulted more in the active travel rural guidance and rural areas. So you're getting us to share routes. If we have to be on the roads, obviously we've got to share them with drivers, but to share routes with cyclists and pedestrians is an important factor as well. And trying to get that message out there to have multi-route user routes, as opposed to just saying it's a cycle route, it's a footpath, and try and get that thinking going.
Thank you. Santiago, let's go back to that reallocation of space. Do you have specific examples you could talk about, where that works and what are the potential risks that go with it?
Well, I totally agree with Alan. What I would go back to enrich this conversation would be that idea of, well, let's keep asking questions about these policies, this for example, a policy of reallocation of space. What may be wrong? Because again, I was talking about the symbolic power of those who sometimes set the agenda, set the discourses around this. So we are up against strong forces who are not for democratic use of roads. So what could we do better when that happens? And I think, and I'm not playing the David's advocate here, but again, if we're going to remain critical and remain vigilant, we need to think, well, these principles of fairness, participation, those of us who are on the right side of the story, who want safer and more democratic roads, what are we missing? What may be happening? Is for example, that participation meaningful and complete and inclusive? And let me give you an example from our own research project, so it doesn't look like I'm pointing fingers. We, as you know, we interviewed road users who have submitted digital footage through journey cams of evidence of road offenses to police forces. And we, to get submitters, we first did a social media appeal, and then we got our participating forces to put an invitation in for whenever someone submitted in the automated email, they would get an invitation to participate. So we interview something like 30, 35 road users, and we also ask them to fill a questionnaire about their demographics, which is, of course, important in research. And what we found around, it's not a big sample, around 25 completed that survey, but what we found is something that is quite consistent with other similar research projects, which is that we had a sample that was disproportionately white, disproportionately highly educated, and disproportionately above average income, which point to a bit of an awkward truth, which is apparently the very preoccupation with road safety, the very ability to mobilize that preoccupation in some form of participation appears to be almost a privilege, which is something we need to address, because the distribution of harms is disproportionately in the other direction. It is lower income communities that are more likely to suffer road harms or environmental harms associated to roads. It is ethnically minoritized peoples who are more likely to live in sort of more crowded areas or cities and suffer more of those harms. So, and then you understand how that is sometimes weaponized when it comes to policies like sustainable, safe redistribution of space. So how do we make that participation really inclusive? How do we get those who are so much more likely to suffer road harms to participate, to be part of the design, but also of the use and of the enjoyment of those roads, is something that needs to be always at the forefront of our thinking when we think of making roads really democratic. In the same way that we should make all road use modalities included in those discussions and in those uses. So that is one point, thinking of participation, of truly democratic participation, that I will always keep in mind.
That's a really important point, Santiago. But I'm going to come to you for the answers as well. So it's a big question. How do you make that democratic then, and to ensure that, with harm being disproportionately affecting lower incomes, how do they get enfranchised into discussions on democratic roads, and how do you kind of make them or encourage them and give them the feeling that they can, because that's part of the issue, isn't it?
It is the issue. Again, keeping the idea of fully inclusive, not tokenistic participation at the center of everything we do at every level. And again, being honest about these awkward truths and going to communities, identifying community leaders, collecting their ideas. And I know this sounds incredibly utopic when it comes to, for example, collecting data, which is very difficult, even with centralized nodes of production of data, like police forces, for example. But again, if we think of what we are up against, we need to make that participation really meaningful. There are experiences. For example, the trajectory of the environmental justice movement in the US, and the identification of communities that are distinctively affected by environmental harm could be a way of putting this. But of course, it is extremely complicated, because it links to other structural social disadvantages. Let's be honest. This isn't just about roads. It just replicates problems on the roads. But we can do, like, starting with identifying those groups that are more likely to be affected. And it can be socioeconomic status, it can be ethnicity, but it is also the elderly, it is also the youngest, it is also women who are more afraid than men to use to ride a horse or to ride a bicycle. That is something we know consistently. And do it at every level. planning, design, enforcement, practice,
Okay.
academia as well. I mean, and I use the example of our project because I acknowledge that as a limitation of our project.
Alan, let's just we heard there from Santiago who was talking about the Journey Cam project and the conversations that he had with participating forces. I'd like to think that every police force would participate at an equal level and have equal, and somebody riding a horse who is involved in an incident would have similar treatment wherever they might be in England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Obviously, we have a large number of police in this audience. So what's your message regarding consistency of dealing with horse-related road incidents? Because that must be really important for you.
It really is, and riders across England and Wales, when they submit journey cam footage or helmet cam footage to the police, they do get differing responses. And this is not in any way, a criticism or pointing the finger at the police, because I realise there's different ways of working, but consistency would be great. So if a horse rider submitted journey cam footage in, say, Lincolnshire, and then they submitted it in Avon and Somerset, that they would expect the same response and the same I suppose the same not respect, but the same way that they knew they were going to be dealt with, and they would be contacted back perhaps, or the driver perhaps would receive a warning letter. That would make things so much easier for horse riders to know that it's not a postcode lottery as regarding submitting journey cam footage. And I know that was a part of Santiago's and Helen Wells's report, is that consistency is really important, and also that the people viewing the journey cam footage have that empathy with the submission, so that the teams, the whatever the name is, the Operation Snap teams around the country, look at it and have that empathy to know what it's like to be on a horse on a road when a car comes past them at 40 miles an hour, or approaches them at 40 miles an hour. And that's something that we've got our film for Operation Snap teams out there to let them know about what it's like to be on a horse on the road, and that is a start of trying to get that consistency across the forces. But we're really thankful of police forces out there and the way they actually look at journey cam footage and take action, really, whether it's a warning letter or actually going through prosecution processes.
How many can you think of that get to as far as court and are successful? I mean, and what are the barriers to that?
I don't know the figures, I'm afraid, but we certainly hear back from horse riders where they have heard from the police that it's gone to court, and I'm not aware of the legal processes these days of how to get things that far, but I can let all the police officers on this call today know how appreciative horse riders are. One, when they get a message back, to just let them know what's happening. Two, that they perhaps understand that the result is a warning letter, or even it's taken to court, or even just an explanation as to why it was no further action. And that's why it's really great in Operation Snap teams that they have somebody who understands what it's like to ride a horse on the road.
Last year, do you remember, I joined you for a ride from Lambourne Gallops into Royal Windsor Horse Show, a 5-day ride, sharing the road. What were the ups and downs from your point of view? Well, obviously, apart from having to deal with me for 5 days in the Wasp at a picnic, Luckhurst, yes, I know. What were the learnings from that? And would you look back and say that was successful? And what was it there to achieve?
Well, publicity of the highway code changes. It was a tremendous sort of public relations exercise involving the police, road safety partnerships, local authorities along the route, and it was great the response that we got from some drivers. I remember I wasn't there at the time, but James, there was a sort of a transit van driver, wasn't there? I'll let you tell the story.
Very well. Yes, we were in Sherlock Row. It was day 4, and it was lunchtime, and a van driver stopped. I was just about to jump onto Oakley for the afternoon shift towards West Windsor, and a van driver pulled up, put his window down, and said, "Are you those guys going to Windsor?" And yeah, yes, I said. He said, "Oh, I heard it all on Jeremy Vine yesterday. I promise I'll always go past nice and wide and nice and slow, and good luck to you." So that's one convert. I don't know. There were quite a few others who perhaps didn't hear Jeremy Vine or chose to ignore what you said on Jeremy Vine.
Well, I think you'll agree. When we were actually riding, I mean, it was 58 miles on both rural roads, but also some quite busier roads that we were there. I only experienced 3 drivers who passed us inappropriately in 58 miles, and it must have been thousands. So that to me was encouraging. I know that's not the situation everywhere, but that was encouraging to me. But the PR effect of it was great. And also we got the support of Lee Dillon MP for Newbury, and the work that he has done in the House of Democracy in Westminster is really encouraging as a result of that. And he's put in an EDM, a petition, a Westminster Hall debate. So yeah, that one ride really I think pushed our campaign forward at quite a rate.
Brilliant. Hey, look, everybody, I'm very happy to take questions and comments. You should find that you're able to turn your camera and your microphone on, but please raise your hand. And I think Teams gives us a little running order. And first up is Jim Densham. So Jim, hello, welcome. You're free to say whatever you would like to, within reason, of course. Tell us who you are and why you're on the call.
Good morning. My name's Jim Densham. I'm from Cycling UK, policy manager. Just a quick question for Alan. Right at the beginning, Alan, you mentioned that you felt that the highway code changes were having an effect, especially on younger drivers. Well, hopefully you would, because they're the ones that are obviously getting taught those new rules. Have you got any data to sort of back that up, or to, where do you feel that is being proven?
Jim, thanks for and yeah, great relationship with Cycling UK that the British Horse Society have, and we thank Cycling UK for actually getting us onto the that Department of Transport stakeholder group. It's only anecdotal, but riders are telling us that they have noticed a change in younger drivers passing them. And there's no specific figures, but they're saying we've noticed that people that have just started or appear to have just started are passing them at 10 miles an hour and at that 2 meters distance. So that is very, very encouraging. I mean, we're not particularly impressed with the surveys that we do when we talk to drivers, and we hear from other surveys from the AA and the RAC that the knowledge of the highway code changes. But that is encouraging when we hear that from horse riders. But no sort of proper figures, I'm afraid, Jim.
Thank you very much, Jim. Number 2. Oh, is it Sonia? Hello, Sonia. Tell us a bit about who you are, why you're on this call, and then you can say whatever you wish.
Hi, I'm a British Horse Society volunteer for access and bridleways, and therefore, like Alan said, trying to get access for horses so that we don't have to go on the road is very important, because my road, for example, which I'm looking at now, is a 60-mile-an-hour limit. It's a country road. It goes from 40 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour at the other end. It has a blind hill, and we have an industrial estate with huge juggernauts that drive along that road. So my question is, we've recently had our local BHS safety officer has managed, with Alan's help, to get a horse triangle warning sign put on new poles. They wouldn't put them on existing poles or signs. They had to be on their own poles. So they've recently put those in. So at the crossroads near my house, they've put up horse warning triangles. And when the BHS asked, could they put this signage below that, which is provided by the BHS, which states 10 miles an hour, 2 meters, to inform drivers what they're meant to do if they do see a horse, they were told that that was not welcome because of the cluttering of signage or something. And I don't understand that. I think that that would make so much sense, where you've got a horse triangle, to add the 10 mile an hour, 2 meter distance as an information. Because if you've got a pole that's been put up, I don't understand why, from what Santiago is saying, for information, uh, that's not allowed, or that's discouraged.
Okay,
Alan,
are there examples in other parts of the country, Alan, where maybe it is allowed? Where is this sort of dependent on the policies of authorities? And how do we learn best practice from perhaps one doing it well?
It is what a best practice, I would say, is Warwickshire and the Warwickshire Road Safety Partnership there, who've been, incredibly supportive of our campaign, and they place their posters. We call them posters, not signs, with the 10 miles an hour and 2 meters distance. And we've had incredible support from them, but other local authorities around the country as well. It is a bit of a postcode lottery, and I am disappointed when certain local authorities say, well, we're not going to put those because they're not DFT signs. Well, we don't in any way attempt to say they're DFT signs. They are posters, temporary information posters. So yes, it is disappointing. But on that point about what is and what isn't allowed, and we're talking about democracy here, and why is it that in the DFT signage you can get an exclamation mark and a red triangle, and you can have pedestrians crossing, you can have cyclists crossing, but there is no plate? And I'm told that there will not be any plates that say horses crossing, because that exclamation mark really, I think, takes my attention for the red triangle, and not just have the black horse in there, have an exclamation mark, horses crossing, in the same way as pedestrians and cyclists. So that's my little 10 penneth in there, James, as well as bigging up Warwickshire.
Yeah, well, I think Sharon Hilton's in the queue of
Oh,
questions.
right.
So, right. Thank you, Sonia, for that observation and that question. Santiago, any reflection on that? Any response to what you've heard from Sonia and Alan in that regard?
No, well, I absolutely agree, and it's an example of you were talking about trust and legitimacy, and one would think that that's an easy way to show that we are inclusive at every level, and it's a bit of a shame that those opportunities are not taken. And on that, I also wanted to get back on what Alan was saying before about the journey camps. Absolutely, to emphasize those 3 points that are really at the center of our report and our recommendations: consistency, feedback and communication, and empathy could basically be the keywords of our report. So I absolutely second that.
Thank you very much. Next up, Josie Jordan. Hello, Josie. What would you like to ask? Oh, tell us a bit about you first, and what you would like to ask afterwards.
Well, I'm Josie, and I do work with James with Project Edward, but I just wanted to give the perspective that I'm also a horse rider and have been for 50 years on the road. And not that long ago, I was riding along a country lane, and a Land Rover with a very rattly trailer came skimming past me and the horse. The horse fell in the road, I fell in the road, and the consequences of that were that I now had my beloved horse loose on a main road, and just thankfully a lorry driver then came and managed to catch him, and catastrophe was averted. But that's the reality of being on the road, and I think this discussion around posters and signage and all of that is very real, and that's also my experience, is that there's nothing there to alert drivers to just take care. I just wanted to thank you for this discussion, because I think it's really thought-provoking, that the whole issue of the democracy on the road and the hierarchy on the road. And I did work on the Journey Cam project, and when I spoke to police, they just said it's a small piece of tarmac, we've all got to share it. And you just, the sort of behaviours and attitudes, you just wish that it's almost, you wish everyone in the country could be on this chat, and everyone could just understand what everybody wants from the road, including horse riders, if you're a cyclist, all vulnerable road users. And but I do feel, I'm no spring chicken, and so I've been on the roads for 50 years, and I do feel like a lot of the kind of, there's so many more delivery drivers, people driving for work, and they're under so much pressure that you can almost
Josie,
understand.
thank you very
I
much
need to
indeed.
stop. Yeah. Okay.
How many years have you been riding on the roads, by the way? This is the third time. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go straight to the next person with the hand up, David Griffiths Allen. Hello, David. Tell us about you, and you're free to talk to Santiago and Alan.
Morning, I'm David. I lead a community engagement team in the construction industry. The primary reason I'm here is as a former road safety officer and somebody that runs hundreds of miles a month on country roads. I remember many years ago when I was working in road safety, and this is picking up Alan's point about experience. We used to have people that came along for certificate of basic training, moped riding, and adult cycle training. And they'd come along and they'd actually be absolutely quivering when they suddenly become a vulnerable road user. I remember one guy that did motorcycle training. After an hour out on the road, he came back to our road safety centre and he said, I've been a lorry driver for 20 years. And he said, I've never been as terrified as I was on a motorbike. And he was actually in tears because he realised that for 20 years, he'd actually been terrorising vulnerable road users with the way he drove. And it's actually the point Alan made, is that until you experience something, you don't appreciate it. And when you're actually running along a country lane and somebody's wing mirror nearly takes your head off, it actually makes you realise just how vulnerable you are.
Good luck with the running. I mean, what brilliant points. We should. I've long been an advocate of that. Everybody should spend a week on a moped before they start learning to drive a car. I have my youngest son. My youngest son is 15. He'll be 16 in July. I live in a very rural location, and he wants a moped and we're having a kind of fairly stiff conversation about what that will mean and what the consequences are. Ultimately, I will say, I'm sure that I'll support him to do it because I want him to experience independence. But I said, you see it as a way of really understanding how vulnerable we all are on the road, and it'll help you for when you're 17, and hopefully we can afford for you to have driving lessons.
Absolutely. My driving improved when I got a motorbike license many years ago.
Oh, and good. How's the running then? I just got a PB in the Liverpool half marathon. I got my first sub 2 hour half marathon, so I was chucked to bits with that. Sorry, I have to share.
Fantastic. I've just turned 57, and I'm running a little bit quicker than that.
Yeah, I was fairly late into it. I'm 61 now. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Let's move on and just introduce from Warwickshire Road Safety Partnership, Sharon Hilton. Hello, Sharon. How are you doing?
Good morning, James. I'm well, thank you. Hello to everybody. I think James has just told you who I am. So just coming in on the horse boards and the signage that people are having issues with, as Alan said, that we've been doing some work on this since 2023. We had the same issues with the local authority around putting signage on the roadside. So we got around this by having some horse board designs with British Horse Society And what we do is that we go directly to landowners and local residents, horse riders, livery yards, and we provide these big A3 boards with the 10 mile an hour and the 2 metre rule on, great big yellow boards with a proviso that they must be fitted on the boundaries of private land. So it means some people have been very artistic in what they've done. We've now distributed over 140 of these boards across Warwickshire. And some people have made them into A-frames, so they're in the hedgerow above the hedge, like a great big for sale board with a double-sided. They've been fastened to gateways, on the edges of driveways. So as long as they're within the boundary of the private property, where they can be seen from the road, the local authorities can't remove them as long as they're not causing obstruction. So this has gone down really well and was a way of getting around the issues of attaching them to the road sign or having them directly on the carriageway where the local authority would move them. We've had great feedback across the county and we've seen a reduction in the number of horse-related incidents in our county since we started this project, which we would like to say, is related to the fact that we've been doing this. We have to be a little bit careful, but certainly since we've been putting the boards out, we've had really positive feedback and we have seen a reduction in the number of horse-related incidents that have been reported.
Oh, Sharon, thank you very much. Is that a good example, Santiago, of an attempt to rebuild trust, perhaps, between authorities and the public? Or is that simply just it's doing the opposite because it's not authorized? It's
No,
we're
it's
having to
brilliant.
find a different way of doing something. But if the end result's the same and has the effect, then that must be good, mustn't it?
I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant, and it speaks to that point about power being fluid and participation sometimes coming out of creativity and stretching the meaning of, for example, what a road is. Yeah, the road isn't just the bit of public space, but everything that we can design and affect that will make it more inclusive and democratic. So it's genius, I think. and I'm glad it's working. So yeah,
Thanks.
and hopefully then that brings this into the official channels where it should actually be happening. Of course, it's not that we should be just happy with that little win, but well done.
It's a good
Sharon
example
and
for shared.
Monica
It's
too.
all Project Edward's all about sharing and good practice replicating. Just quickly bringing Jim Densham back. Jim, you've got your hand up again, so please.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to, like John Furness has put a question in the Q&A and I thought it was important and I wanted to add to that in a way. So he asks, roads, how do we get away from this this idea that roads are for cars? And on Santiago, we've heard about, there's quite a lot of this about motor normativity, which is a term which is growing in use, and the idea that people in society see motoring as normal, and they don't, and it's also not just drivers. It's not people who drive a car who think that cars are roads are for cars, but society in general feels that if you ask people, they feel like, yeah, it's okay to park your private property, leave your private property on the roadside, whereas as a car or but other things not. And so the idea of public space in terms of becomes feeling like, well, it's so normal for it to be for cars that other things become, well, how can you possibly think that something else could use the road? It's because they're for cars. How you've talked about getting less vulnerable groups or other participation involved, but how do you also change from the other side to help people to see that motor normativity is not it should not be that way? And how do you see that the cars are just a guest on the road as much as anybody else using the road?
Santiago, do you have any answer, any sort of specific? Oh, you're moving around a little bit.
I had a misfunction. Just to say, I absolutely agree, Jim, and yes, motor normativity and these ideas like windshield bias also in enforcement is also at the center of our work. How to change it is, I think it's a generational issue. Something that is sometimes as encouraging as it is discouraging is that if you travel maybe a few hundred miles and fall in some places of, let's say, continental Europe, is motonormativity appears to be a less powerful force, and we know that hasn't been the case for very long. So I think education is a good way to go there. As you say, it's not only driver. Maybe we should teach our children that roads are not only for cars, and they shouldn't just be afraid and cautious about cars, but also to claim roads as their public spaces. And yeah, participation as broad, radical, and inclusive as possible, I think ultimately can lead to changes in that. But unfortunately, I don't have a concrete answer, but I completely agree with you.
I mean, Alan, let me bring you in on it. Just, I guess, tell us about your close pass operations, because that's done for horses and for cycling. So, I'm coming past, perhaps too fast, too close. My take on that afterwards, well, that's understandable. No big deal, kind of thing. I mean, I'm obviously not trying to hurt or cause damage to anyone or anything. You're saying, hang on a minute, driver, that's clear endangerment. So are you getting that message across in the close pass operations that you have seen? Because that's, I think, at the core of this, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're very grateful to the 21 police forces that have done close pass operations out there. And that's absolutely right. Quite a few drivers, when stopped, they say, well, one, surprisingly and shockingly, I didn't even see the horse. Secondly, well, I thought I'd passed correctly. One, they didn't know about the highway code changes, and two, there was the sort of the education and the involvement in information to them, and off they go. So. But also, one very strong message we're trying to get on: you can pass a horse, think everything's fine, and then the horse has reacted, ended up in a ditch. We've had a case where that happened, and the horse had to be put down at the scene. There's not you don't have to have that impact or that collision. It's what happens and the horse reacts, and that is a message that we're putting out there as well. That you might think that you've passed nice and safely, you've gone reasonably slowly, or you've taken that, but it's getting that again, that three brains. How is the horse reacting? And that is the message that we're really getting out there.
Thank you, Alan. Ben Graham, thank you for being patient. Tell us who you are and what you're doing on this call.
Oh, hi. Yes. So, hi, James. Yes. So I'm Ben Graham. I'm from the John Lewis Partnership. I also have other hats. So I'm part of the Motorcycle Action Group. Very keen motorcyclist. That's another vulnerable road user, incidentally, that doesn't get a lot of publicity. So my query really, and I've spent some time with Alan in the past. You might remember Alan down in Aylesford, I believe. So I think all horse riders, all cyclists, all motorcyclists, in fact, all lorry drivers would like drivers to spend some time in their vehicle and understand their perspective. But realistically, how do we do that? And I think about the speed awareness scheme that came out in 2003. Originally, there were proposals to do a 2-day course with on-road driving, and in the end, they settled for 3-hour workshops, which was able then to get out to masses. And that's what we've got to think about: is how do we get out to masses? And we did see a drop in fatalities over that decade of 46%. So it definitely had an effect. We could, I feel, do with more campaigns on media channels. If you think about the highway code changes, it was generally left to newspapers to misinterpret them and publicise them. There wasn't really that much from the government publicising any of the changes, and I just think that's something we could do a lot better.
Oh, thank you very much, Ben. Any comment on that, Alan?
Yeah, Ben, great to see you again. And I was just saying, as when you mentioned John Lewis, I thought, yes, we've worked with John Lewis as regards getting those messages out there. I mean, we have a virtual reality headset that shows what it's like to be on a horse when a car passes too fast or too closely, that I know a lot of road safety partnerships are using. It can be as a 360 on a device as well. We as a charity haven't got the money to put something out on sort of mainstream TV, but we do have a lot of resources on our website that are able to be shared. And there's a great highway code film out there now, which Co-Pilot produced. Martin Clunes narrates it. And there's also a really good film which we did with Merseyside Mounted Police and Arriva buses that shows about those highway code changes. But yes, it would be great if we could get them out on more mainstream. And there's one little tick. The road safety strategy, DFT, have admitted that they need to do more about the highway code awareness. So let's see if they're as good as their word.
Jock Boyle, I bring you in very briefly because we're just coming to the end. So tell us just briefly why you're here and what's your question or comment. Oh, you're on mute, Jock. I think you need to just take your mute. That's it.
Apologies.
Hi.
Yes, with everything I've been doing over the last few years, so London has evidenced a 50% reduction in road fatalities of pedestrians, cyclists, and riders and everybody. Whereas the national average is 1%. This is down to political inaction. The road safety strategy that has done nothing. They've rejected everything. And that's what I'm doing now. As obviously the solution is drivers can't see out the vehicles, and that because of the vehicle design, and that's been evidenced by Loughborough University Transport Research Lab. All the evidence is there as you can't drive with impaired vision.
Jock, I'm just going to, we'll have to steer this back because we better stay on top of it. We've only got a few moments. That's a really key issue and it's something we will come back to. But for now, I need to just bring this to a close as we come to 9 o'clock because everybody's going to be jumping off. So Jock, thank you very much, Jock Boyle, for your comment. Alan, what one thing would you like to see change if it could tomorrow to make these roads more democratic and to make you and horse riders across the country feel safer? Just one thing.
Strengthen partnership working. I mean, we've got some really good partners out there, but strengthen it with the government and the police and the local authorities and road safety partnerships. So strengthen that partnership working.
And Santiago, looking ahead, what would a genuinely democratic approach to mobility policy look like? And how far are we from it? And how can we achieve it?
We are at different distances from it. We shouldn't consider it a goal, but more a kind of perspective or something to work towards. And the best way to do it is participation, and every instance, agency, institution, organization with a say, from businesses to government agencies to activists and individuals, thinking how much better our roads would be if they were full of vulnerable road users occupying those roads and using them in a safe and environmentally healthy contexts. So that's my utopia for you this morning.
Santiago Amietta, Alan Hiscox, thank you very much. Also thanks to Jock Boyle, Ben Graham, Jim Densham, Sharon Hilton, David Griffiths, Alan, Josie Jordan and Sonia, who all contributed with questions and comments. Really appreciate it. That is the end of this third Friday conversation. Let me just tell you that next month we also have our first Friday on the third Friday. So the 22nd of May, put it in your diary, 8 a.m. We will have Antonio Avenoso from the European Transport Safety Council. giving us an update on alcohol interlocks. And next Friday on our podcast, the episode will be recorded with Sally Kidd, Professor Sally Kidd from Leicester University, talking about how to a better definition between Section 2 and Section 3 road traffic offences, careless and dangerous. So that's all next week. But for now, from me, thank you very much for tuning in and cheerio. Bye-bye. Thank you.